To share the screen. Uh, okay, here we go. In the part, in the chapter one, part one, we were talking about that the price is what we pay and the value that we get, and this is by Warren Buffett. So we're looking for the value that we're gonna get from buying a simple stuff, food or whatever, to the most complicated thing, like softwares and solution. And if the value, the price that we're gonna pay in a dollar sense equal with the value that we will receive, or the value is higher, then we are willing to exchange the dollars to the to that service and product. So basically, the customer always, that's what he's looking for, is a value. And also, we introduce in general the solution of higher education as a sample and how the processes it breaks down. Also, we talked about the reason to look for a system and how some company says we want to replace our legacy system. Some of them would say we need to replace our current supplier because the supplier is not doing a good job, and there is other reasons, and it could be a combination of the reason we are seeking a new system or we need to integrate multiple systems. And we spoke about the perceived benefit of a system, and these benefits should be presented to the management and CIO and CTO in order for them to make the decision to invest into a new software, a new solution, or keep on the current solution. So the current solution, they will examine it against such things that tighter integration, IT cost reduction, data accuracies, adoption and industry standards. And we talked about different reasons why what's the benefit of utilizing their current applications and softwares and solutions, or whether they want to replace it. And also, we talked about the value is about reducing the time of processing or reducing the time of acquiring. We're also looking at the value of lowering the cost of productions. We spoke about minimizing the risk in an overall. And we talked about the poor enterprise software decision. Sometimes the company and the organization just don't do their due diligent work, and they just pass it to, the supplier to let them know. But if you are selecting a bad thing to run your system for the next 5 to 10 years, basically you paying money to get headache, heartaches, and problems, and you become less effective. So poor enterprise software decision costs companies time, money, and heartache. And we talked about failing in the implementation, failing in selecting the solution. They are run into problems. Some of them, they said we would not choose the same application, and there is implementation failed. And we said that these numbers could be very high than what we look because there is a tendency, whomever is selected that does not want to expose himself or herself. So the easiest way and the biggest mistake that you easy let the ownership and control in the hand of the salespeople of the company, the suppliers of the software or the consultant of the software, because these are the people more consultancy hours, better for them, more functionality, better for them. And once you sign in with them, whether you like it or not, you're signing that you need to pay yearly uh, fees for using their software, beside you paying for the maintenance and support, and beside you paying implementation, and you play first time buying that application. So as a lots of investment, and there is a hidden cost of investment that you need to calculate before you're selecting. There is a total cost of ownership you need to calculate, which is we will be talking about it, how you do that in the later stage in our semester. We talked about the common mistake. The common mistake is not clearly communicate why we need such an application or solution. We talked about what really needed to there, knowing exactly to how to do it. The uniqueness, we said that you might bring in a consultant who worked in another hospital and he's a consultant. He says, well, let's use the same application, or the IT person who use the same application different, and there is a uniqueness in your business is different than your competition or your neighbor company. Choosing the most qualified vendor, you have to have an open eye, and you give the implementation time and attention needed, because you're looking at investing in solution for a long term. Now, with the challenges that we always face when we try to implement or they promising us is more marketing rhetoric. We want to see is these are fact or just marketing. Sometimes you get delivery versus a promises, software, hardware not compatible. These are technology implementation failure. These are technology challenges. The internal challenges, I do have a limited resources and I'm fully utilize them in doing their business, and they are generating income, and they don't have time to use to help in implementing. So this is a challenge for internal challenge. And there is a project challenge, which is we're not clear about it's an unstructured plan and unclear scope, and the challenges goes on. But the biggest thing that it might cause the failing is the biggest challenge, which is building the consensus, building everybody agree on going with the X solution or Y solution, and that doesn't come if the everybody understand why we are doing such thing. Once you get the consensus, you then you probably some of your road will be very clear and you can move on with it. So we said there is four core competencies for in order for you to evaluate your application or to select an application or a solution. The first core is the research. You have to do a full, honest research of application and solution available in the market. You also need to have a methodology, which is we will be talking about the methodology of solution or software selection and evaluation. You also need to have experience. You cannot have no experience and start selecting as a solution for you. And we also spoke about the technology. You have to be updated on the technology and where is the direction is going, and whether this solution you selected can accommodate the future needs and demand. Here, so we talked up to here. Now the issues here comes in when we are doing uh, evaluation for our softwares or for our solution. First of all, we need to separate uh, issues from each other. So here, what we are looking at, we need to separate the objective things from the subjective part. Now, the objective is like something is very clear. 1 + 1 is equal with 2. The subjective is something is depend on the user. So here what we are looking for, we really need to, to make the decision whether we're going to go with the software that we have solutions or selecting a new one. First of all, it's like a pyramid where you need to start building it from the bottom up. And to build that, you have to separate the objective part from the subjective part. And the first thing, the objective, the very clear objective is functionality and technology. You put your functionality. Does your application solution meet your functionalities, that requirement? The new one, is it going to replace the similar functionalities, or they going to add more functionality that you are looking for? Also the process and procedures. The second part is the technology. So the technology, it has to be very clear. If I'm using DB2, it would be very difficult as a database, very difficult to do RDBMS. We had a situation where we went on with the supply with the customer explaining how wonderful our solution. In the end, we found out that all his solution is run on mainframes, and our solution does not run on a mainframe. So we had the difficulties at that time to really convince the customer to really throw his $6 million mainframe investment and come with us in our way. So the objective is very clear, is the functionality and technology. Once you are clear about them, then you start building the subjective part. And the subjective part is like market data, research about the market data. How many companies is implementing this? What has done for them? These are the marketing or market data that you need to collect. And then you can do the RFP technical review. So you publish your RFI to invite most of the companies that you think they can, and then you select them and you build an RFP, request for a proposal, and submit it. And this is would be a subjective, because some answers of the question, it could be acceptable for you, but it could not be acceptable for the end user or the for manager or the other IT person. So it is a subjective in a way. Then we go with a scripted scenario. You see, the subjective part goes more and more there. When we talk about scripted scenarios, is you probably invite the suppliers, SAP, Oracle, whomever you're planning to, and you give him a scripted scenario. Show me how to do posting in Oracle in financial, and how this, show you how the process is happening, and you enter it. That's what you call a scripted scenario. And then easy to use. Well, this is a very subjective thing. Easy to use to whom? To you, to your friend, in your work, to your colleague, to your boss, or the non-IT people. So easy to use, you need, once again, is a subjective, but has to be built after you clear the two objectives. And the seven is process fit. As we said that companies cannot change averagely more than 15 to 20% adjust their processes. So you want to make sure you don't suddenly change all the company's processes. If you, because this application carries, this solution carries the best practice, which is they meant best processes. But if suddenly you introduce all the best processes to a company, this company might reject that. And the second part of it is best processes for whom? Is it good for me? Fit me? Can I adjust now 15 to 20% of my processes and later on I make it better? Because the processes, if it's right, you making a profit, your cost is going lower, and if your processes is really inefficient, and we spoke about it in that chapter 2, part 1, then it costs you more if you have inefficient processes or bad processes. So that's the processes that you look. We spoke about now easy to use and the processes. And the last part you look at it is the reference. It's what's my neighbor is using, what's my competition is doing, what's the company that better as me is doing. But we have a tendency, most of the companies go from top to bottom, which is that's doomed to be getting into mistakes. You need to be building from the bottom to up. You start from functionalities, technology, then marketing data or market data. Then you build your RFI and RFP, technical review. Then you do a scripted scenario and you invite a few companies to present that, and then you will go around and see how easy to use, and then you will find out how much of your processes that you need to adjust, whether the solution can adjust to your processes, or you have to adjust it to the solution processes. And then the last thing, you look at the reference. So the analytical evaluation, a consultant, this is supposed to do. First, they have to do a research, and then the second step, they have to do an evaluation, and the last is selection. In this process, what we do a requirement criteria. So we go to the end users, we collect the features and functions and things that he's going to do. Maybe they're already in place in the application that he's using, or maybe it's not in place, but he likes to have the requirements there. And we gather them, we change them to the technical requirement, so the people in the supplier side understand the requirement. And these, the feature and the functions categories, requirement, and then we look at the custom requirement, things that we think it's special, that our neighbor don't have it, our competition don't have it. Once we're done with this research, we go and start prioritize these requirements. Some requirements must have, some requirements important, some requirements is a critical, like a core solution for his job, and some requirement it's nice to have. um, so you look at them as must to have. Under the must to have, you look at whether important, critical, or not needed. These requirements now, or maybe needed in the future. At a very important do we requirement, which is the feature and functions, which is their custom requirement, as you see here, the feature and function you see very important and must have and important to have, because they are a custom requirement, and these are, we use them to operate our organization. Once we finish with the end user priorities, so you start from the end user priorities, as we said earlier, we saw in the first slide, you start from the top, you go to the bottom, and then you start evaluating. Now, how you do evaluate? You evaluate your current solution, your vendor B or A, and the vendor C. You do a cross evaluating. And because you have all the function and features, and nice to have, and must to have, and critical to have, then you say the solution, the vendors will be glad to let you know whether it's supported, customization there, or whether you have it supported in your solution. Sometimes your current solution have all the requirement and supporting all your requirement, and the suppliers don't have these things. You do some personal, some customization. So the you do, once you cross check with the function and features, functions and features, or feature of functions, then you see who is supporting most of the functions that you can do. Now, it's when there is a, you're seeking a function that is a nice to have, so different than you seeking a function that must have. And later on, I will show you how you set up the point numbers or points to these evaluation. You need to do this evaluation with a certain approach, which is sometimes we don't have the full picture of final result. But if you put, this way of the evaluation, you will have a full result. Not to go ahead, I'm just going to stick to this, and probably in a week 2 or 3, week 3 or 4, we will be talking more about how you prioritize things. Then, after the evaluation, you will do a selection, which is the selection we spoke about here when we do evaluation, which product is meeting all the solution, which product is product C. If it's you see, if we can say, put it this way, says product A, which is our coolant solution, has only 8 criteria or 8 functionality is failing. A product P, which is we are planning to buy and invest in it, has a 12 criteria that failed in it. They don't meet the 12 criteria. And core product C, which is the another vendor, is also has failed it. So if you notice here, maybe our current solution is meeting all the requirement that we are needed. But that can be divided in a percentage wise. When we have 100 functions and 60% of it is met, then we have something like a 60% is met, and then we have, for example, 58% is met. This would be clear how many requirements is met. Later on, we will do the weighted average, is when this percentage versus how much is important, must have, nice have. So if it's met, you give it 1 mark. But the weight for it, it could be from 50, which is nice to have, to critical or important, which is you probably set it up at 90 per 90. So 1 multiply 90 becomes 90, but 1 multiply 50, 60 becomes 60. So the end here, the weighted average makes a big difference when you're multiplying and you see which one is more important. Then you come with the selection once you do the weighted average, but the process of the selection is not stopping here. You have an extended criteria that you need to do, which is you look at marketing data or market data here. You look at the demonstration, which is you said, you do a customized demonstration, and you check the references here. Then you also here in marketing data, you need to evaluate what's nice to have, what's important to have, and what's less important. And eventually you do an assessment for these extended criteria. So there is requirement criteria is made of the feature, function, and categories, customs ones, and the extended criteria. And if you notice here, what we have spoke about it is we spoke about the last things is the reference, is the marketing data is the last thing you do. So just to wanted to take you back to the last slide, remind you this what we meant here. Now, after that, when we do the selection, but then we come up with a solution. But how are we going to do it? From the beginning, when we want to evaluate our solution or we want to replace our solution, trust me, it would be very wise to build a project plan to communicate, because we said the problem, people don't know why and they don't have the time for it. But if you're building a project plan for software evaluation, for solution evaluation, or a project to implement a new application, and communicate that with the end users and the management so they can allocate time for you to do that. So in the project, you build a project charter out. We will talk about project management, a full chapter alone, but here we're just going to give you a good feeling about it. So a general feeling. The outline, the project, we need to clear, when we do a project here, we have to set up the objectives clear, what we want to do, and we need to divide the role and responsibility. So it's voila, let's say you make a selection or evaluation, it takes you maybe 4 months. Just don't leave it like this as way they do consultant. So you should have it clear communicated with the management and with the end users, and how you, there is a kickoff meeting, there is a research which is divided in different stages, and then in a monthly probably you want to do, or evaluation. Eventually you come up with your research, whether you want to do a selection for external vendors, or you are happy with your application. This is a sample of an ERP district manufacturing. See, here the tech advisor, which is I showed you the video of earlier, of the CTO tech advisor. He has a patent. They're located in Montreal. They have a patent of doing all these things, and they develop it to application. So here, what they do, you as a consultant makes it easier and more organized. And we will show you one day the details of the application. You go one by one, and you try to really evaluated based on the solution. So here where we will stop, I think, because these can be eventually, if you notice here, you're trying to supply, implement your ERP, it's very clear, it's telling you for what criteria is failing if you're buying a new ERP, and you still can compare it with your ERP. And also it tells you very clear the percentage wise which one match you the best. Now there is, you can select the vendors, you can prioritize your need, you can compare the result, and you can put the what if analysis, rating graphics, and report. It's an application that they develop where you can enter your data and get the result process. Usually a consultant do it on an Excel sheet, and not very effective, not good for the management to make a decision. Here is a very clear, and you go step by step, doing from financial to human resource, and they can be expanded. And then the questionnaires comes in here, and you enter your answer. Nice to have, must to have, hard to have, not necessary. And then it compares it to application like SAP, for example, Oracle, NetSuite, and see is it matching and how much is matching. We will talk more details about this part of the application, hopefully in the class after.